The following program is a UWTV classic.
From the University of Washington in Seattle, Upon Reflection.
Hello and welcome to Upon Reflection. I'm Marcia Alvar. To watch a play on the stage is to be captured by an illusion, created with acting skill and all of the technical elements that go into any production, lighting, stage design, and costumes. Sarah Nash Gates was drawn to this enticing profession while still in high school, and has gone on to a career in costume and stage design for theater, opera, dance, even the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus Clown College. In addition to work she's done regionally with many theaters, ACT, Intiman, the Rep, the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, Gates is director of the University of Washington School of Drama. Welcome to Upon Reflection. I was trying to think what it is about a live stage production that's different, and what it is it gives an audience that you don't get watching a TV show, a film.
Oh, it's the energy. There is an electricity that goes between a performer and the audience. And I think I think it happens in at sporting events, that the electricity. I mean, I remember going to my first professional football game, and now I understand why people in Green Bay sit out in sub-zero weather, because there's electricity, there's an immediacy. When people share the same space, just as it's much more interesting to talk to someone face to face than it is, say, on the telephone or over the internet, there is a magic. There is an electricity that happens that can't be bottled or whatever, and that's why live is so very special.
And in a time when virtually everything is being discussed as possibly a virtual experience, you don't think that the future of theater is at all threatened, that somehow people might be able to get that? Is that magic able to be synthesized?
No, it's not the same way. It's just it is similar in a way to the experience of worship, perhaps, and that people enjoy going to places of worship together and being that they don't want to worship by their television. It's the same kind of experience of human beings sharing an experience, and I don't think that's ever going to go away. Humans are always going to enjoy that contact with each other.
I met a little girl once, not too many years ago, who wanted to be an actress. And there was something about the way she talked about the desire and the ambition she had that I thought, gee, do people who want to be dentists ever talk about their profession with the same passion? You know, she wanted to be, and you could just see it in every fiber of her being, and wonder what it is about this profession, the stage side of it, not the audience side of it, that makes it such a passion for people.
Well, I don't really know. I don't fully understand.
Do you think people talk about dentistry with this same passion?
No.
I should pick on dentists.
I know. They might speak about, I've heard, some people will speak about medicine with passion, and some of those, or some of those, what I want to call helping professions, the social workers and things like that, where people really want to help each other. But I think artists do help people. And I think there is something of there's something of about the theater that you feel you're helping human beings understand their lives and their place in the world, that there's something there, that it's a mission.
I think there's something also about throwing yourself out of yourself.
Yes.
To other people, that it does take a lot of energy to do that.
Oh, a tremendous energy.
Tell me do you remember when you got bit by the bug?
It was in high school. It was. I used to act. I did act, but I also enjoyed costuming it's a way of telling people about other people by what they wear, and we hear a picture is worth 1,000 words all of the time, but it's very true. And somewhere end of high school or beginning of college, I began it was very powerful, and it was a way for me to work with the entire play and not just one character. Where when you're acting, you're playing one character. And I as I said, I had done some of that, but then I found I really enjoyed this. I could affect the whole world, all of the characters and their world with what they wore. So that intrigued me.
You didn't talk about the safety net you had too when you chose costuming.
Yes, well, in high school, when I got to high school, to join the drama club, you needed to sign up to work in a particular area, and I chose the costume committee because I knew my mother sewed, and she had worked on costumes for my older sister. So that's how I started. It was because I knew Mother would bail me out if I got stuck.
As mothers have done since time immemorial.
Yes, and she still does, and she still bails me out periodically. But it was self-serving. I didn't draw or paint. I didn't like to sew. It was an accident. And then I started doing costuming and started discovering what a wonderfully interesting, creative thing it is to do.
We're going to take a look at some examples of the work you've done. And maybe as we look at the first set, which is from King John, right?
Right.
Talk about how you approached that costume, because I kept thinking, gee, there's only so many ways to dress a king. How do you decide how you're going to
Well, and King John is interesting. He's historical. It's based in history. This was for Oregon Shakespeare Festival. And the basic tunic of the 13th century is the same, but deciding on what kind of trim and some of that. The red boots is a theatrical choice as opposed to an historically accurate choice. And so the red king is King John, and the blue king is the King of France. And the standing figure he's actually a cardinal, but a 13th century cardinal wears an archbishop's hat, I discovered. And so that's why he has his archbishop's hat and not the cardinal's
So
flat
there's a fair
hat.
amount of research that has to be done.
A lot of historical research that needs to be done, yeah. And then the character in between the two seated kings is the queen, and I think we're going to see her next.
Okay.
The king's mother. There she is.
There she is.
And the belts are historically accurate, but the patterning on the chest area, the bodice area, is designed by me. It's smocking, which we normally see in tiny little patterns on little girls' dresses. And then I think the next picture is going to show us this smocking when it's done in wool on 3-inch centers instead of half-inch centers. You can see the texture, the kind of waffly texture it makes. And
I think the other thing about what we're looking at now, which is a different character in the play, is this wonderful draping of the sleeve.
Right.
And it is, you should pardon the phrase, very dramatic when the character raises her arm like that.
Yes. And this character, her job in the play is to be a beautiful princess. That's her total job. So
sounds like great work.
That was
it?
kind of fun. Yes.
So it's very nice. You have this sort of artistic raising of the arm from the character
and
whose
Kamala,
job is to be beautiful.
The actress wore it well.
Do you have to approach costume design differently depending on if it's for an opera or a play, or, I mean, is there just something inherently different?
There are certain things that are different. No, basically it is the same. One determines whether it's the director or the choreographer or whatever it is, what is the purpose? What are we going to try to convey with the costumes, and what mood and that kind of thing. And then we work from there, so that the basic approach is the same, and even if I were designing for what you wear for this program. The point is that you should, for this, for instance, you want to be attractive and
sort of look like you know what you're doing.
Right, so
that
professional,
sort of
contemporary. So it's that we we would start there. And I think in opera, where it's so big, and it doesn't need to appear to be real, that quite often one can go a little further, be a little more fantastic, maybe a little more, quote, creative, and less rooted in historical accuracy, which makes opera quite exciting.
We're going to look at some more costumes that you've done, and this is for quite a different production than the last one that we saw.
Right.
The first one that we looked at was Shakespearean.
Yes.
This one that we're looking at is a more contemporary play, Biederman and the Firebugs.
Biederman and the Firebugs, and the firemen, the chorus in this play are firemen, and they are, they're ineffectual, and so in their firefighting gear, everything was pristine and clean and beautiful. But at the same time, we purchased real firefighters' jackets that meet code, and then we embellished the yellow trim is safety markings that comes on it, and that's all embellished with gold metallic trim.
When you say ineffectual, that means that they have a certain look to them,
Yes.
but they don't really look like they've done a lot of work
Right,
and
exactly.
succeeded in putting out a lot of fires.
Right. They are so clean and crisp that they couldn't possibly put out fires. But to do research for this one took me to my local Seattle fire station, which I thought, and they enjoyed it too, I think, to visit when I visited them.
We have a couple more costumes.
And then this is the fire chief off duty. That they have their firefighting gear, and then they have this, they're hanging around this firehouse gear, so to speak. And the red suspenders are an accurate thing that firefighters do wear. And they also, to me, are a little humorous. And then these are the sort of the rank and file firefighters with their baseball caps as opposed to the peak cap.
And there they are.
And there they are.
Hanging out.
Yeah.
There is, I mean, it's very funny that you mentioned that, the whole business about whether or not they're really effectual or whether or not they just kind of look the part, so to speak.
Right. And so that one way that we try to communicate to the audience that they aren't effectual was to have them be totally neat as pins and clean and tidy and all of that. And they also just were numbers. There was number 1, number 2, number 3. They didn't have a name, so that they kind of weren't real. Was a way to say that. The
last costume that we're going to go back to Shakespeare.
Okay.
And this, I think, may be the crew of this show's favorite costume, because there's a wonderful, you just went by, has nails.
Yeah, this is Caliban from The Tempest, again at Oregon Shakespeare Festival, and he is in the text, he threatens Miranda, and she is frightened of him. And so I felt we needed to believe he could hurt her. And so the nails, that he would look strong, but he also had big nails on his fingers and on his toes, so that, as an animal would scratch or hurt somebody. So that's where the has nails came from.
He has an oddly contemporary look to his hair, I think.
It does. He has a bit of a mohawk on his.
I think I saw that hairdo just the other day. It's very much of our time. That one looked like it was a lot of fun to do.
Oh yes, that was very fun. A lot of work to get. It's all based on a lycra suit, the bodysuit, and so just getting in and out of it was very difficult for the actor. It takes a lot of fittings, a lot of time to get all the pieces to work right, and
make sure the nails
stay on, and that they line up with his fingers, and that when he moves his hands that it's comfortable. Also, actors, I say you can be hot, but you need to be comfortable. Otherwise they can't act.
And as I mentioned in the introduction, it's this level of detail, I think, that makes theater so compelling, and is part of what weaves the spell. We don't have any pictures of it, but I am intrigued by the work you did with the Circus College, with Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey.
Well, the interesting things about working with clowns is they never perform without their costume. So in a way where an actor, or for a play, might choose to do it in either rehearsal clothes or street clothes, but clowns never work without their costumes. so that their costume is even more important to them in a way than it is for an actor. So what I did was help the student clowns learn to make costumes so that they could provide for themselves, essentially, and then offered advice about designing, design advice and so on. So it was very
You're really
special.
talking about their personality. I
Yeah.
guess the most famous would be Emmett Kelly.
Yes.
And the sad clown that
Right.
he designed for himself, and that it becomes synonymous
Yes.
with the person who wears
So
the
it's
suit.
very personal. It's a very personal thing, and to sort of be allowed to help that process with these creative artists was very exciting. It was a real
Part costume
privilege.
designer, part psychologist.
Well, yes,
almost.
well, that's true too.
Tell me about the role that universities play in this entire universe of theater, because I think there's such a great impatience sometimes for young people to get out into the world, out into the theater, that somehow the idea of a stop at a university to be trained doesn't enter into their mind.
Well, I often tell prospective graduate students that there are two ways to learn a profession, and it works for the theater in all of its varying aspects. You can either go and work and learn sort of from the apprentice master system, learn on the job, or you can go to a training program where you pay to be allowed to work, to be allowed to have experiences, whether you're a designer or an actor. And that's the way that you get the experience that makes you then desirable, or saleable in that, and it completes your development as an artist. So I think most of the most impatient students tend to be the undergraduates, and the older you get, the more you realize how much there is to learn and how much there is to know, and I think you learn more patience also.
Of course, the whole world of theater has changed so dramatically in the last 20 years,
Right.
in that it used to be that if you wanted to hit the big time, you had to go to New York, you had
Right.
to be on Broadway. Talk about where regional theater really emerged. What was the engine that drove the development of regional theater?
Well, the engine it came out of the '60s, and it was led by Sir Tyrone Guthrie, who is British. He came to Canada and worked at the Stratford, Ontario Shakespeare Festival, and then he was invited to Minneapolis to form a theater company.
The Guthrie Theater.
The Guthrie
Wonderful
theater, which is still one of the flagships of the regional theaters. And what he proved was that communities would support theater, and that there was a market. People wanted them in their communities, and many cities followed suit. And Seattle was one of the leading. The Seattle Rep was founded in the very early '60s, and so that it is possible for people, for actors in particular, to live in one city and earn a living without having to be on Broadway or go to Hollywood and be in film or TV. And at the same time, it is possible to go back and forth a little bit. I think we don't see that as much in this country as perhaps in England, but John Aylward, who is an actor, he's a graduate of our program here at the UW, is now doing a fair amount of work in Hollywood for television, as well as
Chris Welch, who's a graduate,
Yes.
has a show coming up
Yes.
in New York.
Yeah. And Gene Smart, and but in this country, people tend to either end up being a TV or film actor, or they're a stage actor. More, there are of course exceptions, but in general.
So if somebody wants to be in the theater, there are a lot more choices.
A lot more choices, right?
But it's still the kind of profession where you go home and you say to mom and dad, gee, I think I want to be in the theater, and there's probably nothing that can scare a parent more than that.
They're not all that enthused, no.
The University of Washington has a wonderful reputation. It's been ranked very highly by U.S. News and World Report in terms of its drama department. How do they decide that? How do they decide that the University of Washington, as opposed to another university, should be that highly ranked?
Well, it's rather controversial, and it's totally unscientific. That they do a survey of about approximately 100 universities that have training programs, and they ask people like myself, who are administrators of these programs, what is our impression of the reputation? Is this a distinguished program?
What an odd way to rank it.
Yes, it's a very highly regarded, good, but distinguished was the top, and then you are allowed to say you don't know, that you're not familiar with a program, and you can check that off. So the scientists are just beside themselves. It's based on reputation, but that is how, in our field, there is no more scientific way to do it, and that is the only kind of ranking that exists in our field.
I suppose one of the ways you could do it is to say how many people who go through this department actually get work in the theater.
How many get work, or where do they get work, and that sort of thing. And what is, of course, the trick then is also to judge what would be, what is the quality of the work. And I think between the students that go to national conferences and participate at that level, and then the ones when they graduate and they go into the theater or into the university, the work they do impresses people, and they say, oh, well, those people are good, so that program must be good.
Whatever. You come out pretty well in it.
We come out, and if I may say so, it's because we have an excellent program.
We're going to take a look.
They're really good.
At some of the training, some of the methods that are being used with actors in the School of Drama, because I think one of the things that it points out is the fact that even though, for me as a member of the audience, I can't tell the difference in the trainings and the different approaches that are being taken, but clearly behind the scenes, some new things are happening.
Yes.
And what we're going to take a look at is a little clip of tape of something called the Suzuki method, and we'll talk about it after we have a chance to see it.
Wind of sunburst breaking forth this day, whereon I lay my hands once more on Helen, my wife. And yet it is not so much as men think, for the woman's sake I came to Troy. But against that guest grew treacherous, who like a robber carried the woman from my house. Right? Wind of sunburst breaking forth this day, whereon I lay my hands once more on Helen, my wife. And yet it is not so much as men think, for the woman's sake I came to Troy. But against that guest proved treacherous, who like a robber carried the woman from my house.
A new method. And what you saw was, with the cue of the slapping of the stick, an instant reaction on the part of the actors to go from mood to... reminded me a little bit of a very old Italian acting technique called wasn't it the Delsarte School?
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, very dramatic and very... But that's what I thought of immediately when I saw that.
Marcia? Yeah. I thought of it. The Suzuki method, also part of the training involves what we call, it's rhythmic stomping. It's walking very firmly. And the idea is that if you train your body so that it is infinitely responsive and reflexive, that it can do whatever you want it to do, then that gives you great freedom as an actor, to be able to use your body to support whatever the intent or the emotion is that you're trying to convey. And it was brought, Professor Robin Hunt and Professor Stephen Pearson have trained with Mr. Suzuki in Japan for 10 or 12 years, I believe, and they are two of 8 Americans authorized by him to train people in his method. And they brought it to the UW in about 1989, and we have really found, I find that our actors have a greater simplicity about them. They're less histrionic, or I think they are more, it feels more honest. It's simple, it's clean, it's sincere. And I have to credit a lot of what makes that happen is this part of the training. The physical work of the Suzuki training is only part of what we do, both with undergraduates and graduates. But I think it comes into play, and that if you know your body and you're in control of your body, then that allows you great freedom to be very simple. And
we began our conversation by talking a bit about the unique qualities of the theater. As we're almost out of time, I wanted to ask you, sort of go back and revisit that in a different fashion, and that is young people now coming into universities, and younger people than that, have grown up really with a different eye, with a different way of visually seeing the world. And in some ways, I think one of the descriptions for the way they watch television is that they're deconstructing it in that sort of the static ways we grew up watching television seem very slow and very boring to them. And whether or not that is going to change theater in the look of theater, the pacing of theater, the way that it's presented on the stage.
Oh, I think so. I think so. It has to do with we're programmed shorter attention span, that sort of thing.
How are you going to do a Shakespearean play for people who have a short attention span?
Well, that's where the passion has to be that much more passionate. And I think if you are doing your work with great integrity and with great passion that reaches out across those proverbial footlights and grabs the audience, it holds them. And then they will stay with us. So that the quality, it's imperative that the quality be excellent. And then we will be able to hold. As well as we need to be able to take into account our changing world and respond to it a little bit.
So the presentation may change, but the passion has to remain the same.
Yeah.
Sarah Nash Gates, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on Upon Reflection.
Well, this was fun.
And we hope to have you back next year. We'll give people hints about that in the months to come.
All right.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
To see more UWTV classics, visit uwtv.org/classics.